If you've been watching the channel, you know that I'm trying to get my workshop up and going. And if you're like me, you find anything that will work as a sawing station. So you might use your lawn chairs, or I might go to my shaving horse, and that is moving all around because it's not really made to hold long pieces of wood, or it's not made to move in those directions. So that we really need a saw bench. So we're going to build one based on the Vasa, a shipwreck from the 17th century. Unfortunately, not everything with this build went according to plan, but at least it wasn't like 1628 in Stockholm Harbor, where the Vasa sank in front of a crowd of thousands of spectators. The first thing we have to do is to cut our bench to length. I will leave a picture of this bench here, and that way you can look at it, pause on it, and see what you think of it. Since we are working with some reclaimed wood, we have to avoid some of the negative things that we don't want in our bench. We've got two big knots here and also a little bit of checking there on the end because it has been sitting outside for a while. So we're going to avoid those and cut it off here, and then we'll go down 6 feet and cut it off on the other end, and then we'll have some scraps for whatever other parts we might need. My goal with a lot of the stuff that I do for this part of my channel is to use just hand tools, not to use any power tools. If I do decide to use a power tool, I will make sure to tell you. That way I'm not just lying to you that everything turned out wonderful. Let me see some benches that you guys have made. I'd love to see what kinds of things you're working on. I do want this to be kind of discussion, so leave me comments. Well, this would be a great time to have a sawing bench, but 2 cinder blocks will have to do for now. So one of the things I discovered quite by accident when I was building my shaving horse is that about the right height for a sawing bench is the height of a propane tank. I'm about 6 foot, and when you do that, it comes right out to just about 19.5 inches high, which again for me seems like that will work very nicely. Here I am marking the legs for the correct height. I would like to mention that the original was a full-size workbench, not a saw bench. So I want to cut on this side of the line because I want to keep that. The thing I like about this bench is that it has a straight leg and an angled leg. The straight leg is so that you can come up and saw right along this edge without having to worry about cutting into your leg. The angled leg will offer a little bit more stability and a wider base to this. The Vasa sank because of lack of balance, too much weight up high. The same could be true if I didn't splay my legs on the bench. And so we want to make sure that we put this leg far enough back that we can put a cleat on. Like I said before, when you're working with wood, you have to work around certain things. So there is a knot here. I don't want to have this protruding through that knot. It'll be much harder to work with. So I'm going to move it just forward of that. It'll leave me about a foot here on the end, which will be fine. When I push down, it shouldn't lift up the whole bench. So we're going to go ahead and first cut our tenon in here, and then we'll cut the mortise in there. So for my tenon, I'm opting to take about 1.5 inches off, and that'll leave me just over 2 inches that will be the tenon part. So we're going to go ahead and set up our marking gauge and mark down for that. And in reality, we only have to go down the thickness of our piece of wood or slightly more, just so it can protrude out the top. So we'll go ahead and mark all the sides on this. I think I will still come in just a little bit on each side, just to, again, give a little bit more of a shelf for the whole thing. I won't come in too much, maybe just like a 1/2 inch from side to side. And next we'll just figure out how much we're taking off to go through the top. We've got it set up here. We want to cut out this piece, we want to cut off this piece and this piece, and we want to leave this as the tenon. I know there is that little check there, but trying to work around stuff, so So now that we got the tenon cut, we just got to do these cheeks off of this. And guess what? This is a great project for my new little mallet that I made. If you didn't see that video, go check it out. When you look at these carvings on the stern of the Vasa, it's just amazing to think all of this was done with hand tools. No 3D printers, no AI, just craftsmen. Like I was saying, I want this to be offset from the face of this board, so it's going to go in. We just have to measure everything out and put our hole in, or our mortise. It will go in like this. To mark the back of our mortise, I'm just going to lay the piece of wood on top and put a line. So we know now that's where our starting point is, and I can draw right around my tenon. Okay, I got all 3 holes are drilled through. Now I'm just going to come through with my chisel and I'm not getting super close to my line yet. I'll come back to that later. I'm just going to come right along the outside. Not bad, considering I haven't done this in years. Pretty happy with that. Next, we just have to make that one look like that one. We'll repeat the process all over again. I don't think I'll bore you with doing it. Well, you can see we've gotten both our legs on with mortise and tenon joints. Still have to make a stretcher to go across here, and then one down towards the bottom as well. The Vasa was raised in 1961, and there's now a museum you can visit in Stockholm. I've got the mortises and the tenon. My goal was not to make a reproduction of this workbench, but to make a saw bench a 17th century carpenter would feel at home using. I'm humble enough to believe that he would probably laugh at my bench, but he would at least recognize most of the joinery. Looking at me saw these pieces makes me realize how badly I need this workbench. Well, you can see that's the basic way it's going to be. I do have to trim the front leg just a little bit. Well, we've gone ahead and pulled apart the bench, and so this is the upper one. We're going to build the lower one. And so I measured, and doing the exact same size one will work out perfectly. So we're just going to mark that. So now I've got this piece marked off just like the other one. So we know that we have to cut along this line, remove all of that, cut along this line, remove that, and we should wind up with something that looks like this. Now, since again we're just going off of recreating the look of this, it looks like it might be maybe 3 or 4 inches up from the bottom. So we'll go ahead and make that the bottom of our mortise. Now, when laying out these bottom mortises, I got to make sure that I come in the same distance on the same face side. So I'm just going to put an F on this one and an F on this one. And that's just to help me remember that that's the face side. Now we've got both of ours marked. We'll do the same thing as we did for the other mortises. So we're going to drill it out and then square it off. And so we'll go ahead and do that. I made some nails since the upper mortises looked like they were held in by raw iron nails. Well, I could admit when I do something wrong and I screwed up a bit. This piece was supposed to be flipped around, and it would have been coming more flush with the edge here, and I put it in wrong. It's kind of too late to change anything because it is all nailed together. So we're going to have to figure out what to do next. So it's not only that this won't be flush on this side, but when we go look at the other leg that angles out, there'll be a problem with that. So you can see that instead of this edge being flush there, it is now hitting out a bit. So I have a couple options. I can either cut it here and slide it in further, but then I really destroy the base being wide apart, or I can come back and put maybe a 2x4 on the end here that I'll glue onto there. One of the interesting things about the Vasa is they messed up, and one side of the ship used a Swedish foot, which is 12 inches, while the other side used the Amsterdam foot, which is 11 inches. Unfortunately, I don't have that to blame for my mistake. Let's talk about the solution I came up with to not scrap this whole project. So what I'm going to do is put on these pieces across the bottom of the top, and I'm going to attach a 2x4 on the end. That'll make the top a little bit wider. I'm going to place it so that this is exactly the distance to allow this to sit flush against that. I guess I won't make that mistake again. I think the problem is that I've been trying to do too many different things, and I just made that simple, foolish mistake, but it did set me back a bit. Unfortunately, Ace didn't have any of the regular screws with the regular slot in them, so I do have to go with these more modern ones, but I am using the hand egg beater drill. At least it's in the spirit of doing this all with hand tools. I was trying to think how I would attach these. I thought about using dowels. I think what I'm going to do is to nail a nail halfway through, cut it off, and then squeeze the boards together with some glue in the center, and that should hold it good enough along with those pieces from underneath. You can see we've got the top put on with the second piece over here, and we're going to call this a happy mistake because now my legs can actually be a little bit wider. I'm able to splay them out further. So we're going to roll with this. The original one had this half lapped, so I don't have to do a mortise and tenon like before. I'm just going to do a half lap over that. And so we'll go ahead and mark that on the other side and then remove the material halfway across. You can see we've got the half lap on, just clamped in place. And in the original, they would have used some nails or spikes on this. Since I'm going to be outside in the weather, I'm leaving this thing outside. I probably will just use some screws on it instead of the nails. I had made some nails, but I really feel like they're just going to come out over the course of time, being that this is kiln-dried wood. I did use my belt sander to smooth the top and remove the ink labels from the lumber. To help set these mortise and tenon joints, since I didn't have a clamp big enough, I made a turnbuckle and I just tightened it down and got those to fit much tighter than they were. So we talked earlier that stuff went wrong in the building of this bench. I would love to know some of your silly mistakes that you may have made or things that went wrong when you were doing projects. I think it's all part of learning. I've already got the basis of a saw bench, and most people probably would consider this good. And so in order to be able to cut out the shape that's going to be here, I'd like to use my saw bench. So what I think I'm going to do is go ahead and put some holes in it so that I can use a Holdfast on this. might as well start using it as is. So we've been using this one over at the forge for blacksmithing, but they're very nice because you just put it in, hit it down, and your piece of wood is locked in place. I am very excited to be able to start doing some projects. This piece will definitely allow me to do a bit more, and then the next one is going to be a full-size workbench. But I was wondering, and this is where hopefully the community of people that watch this help me decide, should I just start doing some other actual projects? Like I was going to make some handheld bellows and maybe some cups and things like that. Let me know what you would like to see. Either a full-size workbench or just start going on some projects. When I'm doing things kind of as I go, it can be helpful to make a pattern for various pieces instead of just starting off with a piece of wood. So what I'm going to do is I mark this to be the width, maximum width that I have for that piece, but it'll go in here. But I also want it to go around this upright piece, but it can only go back this far. And so I'm going to go ahead, cut this out, make a pattern for what the shape of this is going to look like. Well, after doing a number of cuts, I really love this bench. I can't wait till it's done. It does not flex, it does not move. It's just beautiful for sawing on. You can see I've got that test fit in there. Took a little bit of finagling and carving away to get it to sit just right, but now we'll do the second piece that will sit on top of that. So I have both of these roughed out. So what I'm going to do is to clamp these together and screw them together. While we're waiting for that other piece to dry, we're going to go ahead and stain this up. Well, it looks pretty decent. There's a couple spots where there's some glue that didn't take the stain, but I'm not really worried about that. Having a saw bench this rock solid just makes you want to get started on the next project immediately. It's a good feeling when the wood and the work come together like this. Perseverance really paid off. I appreciate you watching this video. If you haven't done so, I'd really love if you would like and subscribe.